So, my last Dragon Ball video, I went over all the different forms of time travel that we saw in Dragon Ball Z and Dragon Ball Super. So this is kind of the companion video to that, where now I would like to go over all of the different timelines we actually see in Dragon Ball Super, and just the overall Dragon Ball universe. As well as I just kind of want to explain what the differences were and what kind of the branching off points were. But hey, real quick guys, I had a goal to reach 1,000 subscribers by the end of the year. And in the last couple videos, we actually did it. I'm now up to 1,003 subscribers, and I just want to say thank you to everybody who has liked my videos enough to actually go ahead and hit that subscribe button. And I can't thank you guys enough for helping me reach this milestone. And honestly though, I would love to see just how high we can get it. Maybe we can get up to 1,010 before the end of the year. I don't know if you guys could help me out with that. Just a little bit of the icing on top. But like I said guys, I cannot be more grateful. And let's go ahead and get to the video. So there's one thing that I have to explain when it comes to how time travel works in the Dragon Ball universe, and that is that when you go back in time, you will go back in time to the main timeline where you branched from. So you don't really go back in time into different timelines. You just go down to your main branch and you continue on from there. And that kind of helps to explain how some of the events take place later on. So the first time we actually see here is, honestly, it's just the main timeline. It is the timeline that you see the overall Dragon Ball story. And branching on from that, we actually have the Universe 12 timeline. Now, the only difference in this timeline is that time travel now exists in this timeline, and possibly the Trunks with blue hair, but we'll get to that a little bit down the road. See, this timeline branched off when Universe 12 made the first time machine and went back in time the very first time. All the events that we know of take place up to a point that we'll get to in the future, but that's the only difference in this timeline. But the next timeline we see is actually the original Future Trunks timeline. This is the timeline where Goku comes back from space and defeats Frieza, then he dies from the heart disease that he comes back with, and then 17 and 18 go on amok, killing the rest of the Z Fighters. And this is where adult Gohan loses his arm and he dies, and then Trunks creates the time machine. When Future Trunks creates this time machine and goes back in time for the first time, he creates another timeline, and that's the Trunks defeats Frieza timeline. And this is where Trunks goes back in time, defeats Frieza and King Cold, and gives Goku the medicine. Then he goes back to the future, realizes nothing has changed. He then goes back in time to when the androids are supposed to appear. Now, in this timeline, they succeed in either defeating the androids, probably using the time chamber, or maybe actually shutting them down with the switch. We don't really know, and if you guys want to see that, I can go more in depth in its own video. Either way, Trunks would then go back and defeat the androids in the future, but then Cell wakes up and kills Trunks when he was going to go back in time and tell everybody that he defeated the androids. Here, Cell goes back in time to 4 years before the androids are set to wake up in his larva form. But this timeline has Earth left with no heroes, and realistically no villains either, since Bibbidi couldn't wake up Boo, Frieza couldn't be resurrected, and Beerus and Whis wouldn't come to Earth because there's no Super Saiyans there. But like I said, that can be a whole other video. But Cell coming back does actually give us another timeline, and this is the timeline I like to call Trunks beats Cell. So in this timeline, Trunks has to contend with Cell when he goes back in time to the past, since Cell coming back would have changed this Trunks' present, and this Trunks is the one we have during the Android saga that definitely went to the time chamber with Vegeta and could defeat a semi-perfect Cell. Then, when he went back to his future, he pretty much sweeps 17 and 18, and then goes on to kill Imperfect Cell. Then he goes back in time to tell everybody what happened, and the events of the BoJack movie take place, which is kind of the only canon Dragon Ball movie. But this is all we know about this particular Trunks' future timeline. But then we can get to Zamasu and what can only be called time ring shenanigans. So how this works is he could actually be stuck in a little bit of a time loop, and I'll get there in a little bit. But first off, we have the Zamasu original timeline. Here, he somehow meets Goku. We're not sure if it's due to Trunks' time traveling or some other meeting. We just know for sure he meets Goku, or at least heard about him, since the Universe 10 tournament still happens. But he did not know about Super Saiyan or Super Saiyan Blue since he learns this technique from the main timeline Goku. But either way, this version's Gowasu teaches him about time travel with the time rings, and he learns about the Super Dragon Balls. He would then go on to kill Gowasu and travel forwards in time to use the Super Dragon Balls to switch bodies with Goku Then he kills Goku, Chi-Chi, and Goten. He would then go to Universe 12 and steal their time machine. Since they've had more time to kind of figure out time travel, their machine actually has the ability to hop universes as well as travel through time. He would then use this time machine until he found a version of himself that had the same beliefs as him, and he would eventually find him in the Universe 12 time travel timeline. So we're going to have to stop there for now, and we're actually going to have to backtrack a little bit to the time travel Universe 12 timeline. So in this timeline, everything happens the same as it did in the main timeline event-wise. The only differences we know of being Trunks actually has blue hair and time travel exists. But we pick up with this timeline after Trunks beats Cell. He then defeats Bibidi and Dabura with Supreme Kai's help and unlocking Perfected Super Saiyan as well as Super Saiyan 2. But then Black would arrive and kill this universe's Gowasu and convince himself to join up. So they would then use the Super Dragon Balls to make Zamasu immortal, and then use the time rings to go into the future, collect the Super Dragon Balls again, and then just destroy them. After this, they go on a rampage, killing all of the Kais and thus the gods of destruction, before ultimately returning to Earth and finding this timeline's future Trunks. Now this Trunks would then try to go back to his main timeline and recruit the help of his Goku and Vegeta, except because Black has come to his universe, this Trunks ends up going to the main timeline and recruiting the main timeline Goku and Vegeta. Basically, this is where Universe 12's timeline and the main timeline would actually converge. Then through this arc, Beerus actually ends up stopping Zamasu from killing Gowasu, thus preventing this from happening in the main timeline, which should theoretically have destroyed Black in the future, but it doesn't. And now Black's timeline, according to the gods, should have been destroyed, and we have a few reasons why it wasn't. One is, in order for the original timeline to be saved, this kind of has to happen, and thus the time loop. Or his time ring actually saves him and literally his entire universe from being destroyed, because time rings can actually have the power to do that, and this is kind of the explanation for what happens. But the third, and in my opinion the most likely explanation for why this doesn't happen, is that, like future Trunks' timeline not changing, you can't actually change the future. You can change the past, but that will just create a new future for that past, and your future will just continue being in the state that it was when you went back to change the past. Regardless of the reason, it doesn't stop Black. Then, in the final fight, him and Zamasu actually fuse, and then Goku gets Zeno to destroy the entire universe. He then goes back to bring this universe's Zeno to the main timeline to play with the main Zeno. So now there's just two Zenos in the main timeline. So we leave here with Black's original timeline and the Universe 12 time travel timeline combining and then ultimately being destroyed by Zeno. After this, in order to give Trunks and Mai a place to return to where all of their friends would still be alive, Whis offers to go back in time to before Black arrives and kills Gowasu in their universe and stop it. Now, this creates a new timeline where that actually just never happened, obviously. And the big difference here is that now there are two Trunkses and two Mais. One Trunks is significantly stronger than the other one, and they kind of have to hide out because they can't really interact with themselves. We never really get to see the payoff to this, except none of their friends are dead in that new universe. But that is actually finally it for time travel, at least so far in the series. But we do actually have two other canon universes that we need to go over. The first one is the Dragon Ball GT timeline. And if you don't want to call this canon, that's perfectly fine. I'm perfectly content with there being a multiverse and this being canon. I actually enjoyed Dragon Ball GT growing up. But in this timeline, the main difference is Beerus does not come to Earth. So instead of getting the gods, Frieza, and the Tournament of Power, as well as the new forms of Super Saiyan, we get the Black Star Dragon Balls, Goku is turned into a kid, and we get Baby and the Shadow Dragons. But there is also a small chance that GT is the future of Super, but that would take a lot of work to actually make happen, unless they're saying that Super Saiyan 4 is just that much stronger than Ultra Ego and Ultra Instinct, and it just isn't. So probably not likely, but Oob is going to be canon in Super. But then we actually have the newest timeline, and that is the Dragon Ball Daima timeline. Daima alters things in a few different ways. It picks up directly after Boo, so Beerus is more than likely not going to be canon, as well as the fact that they changed how Supreme Kai and Kibito unfused. In the Super timeline, they made a wish to make it happen. In Daima, they just have Majin Buu eat them and do the same thing that it did to Vegito. So the 30-minute Potara fusion is also probably no longer canon in this universe, as well as they go to the Demon Realm, and they are all actually turned back into children. And I think this is actually just their way of kind of going, hey, we can do a Kid Goku better. But we'll have to see. Dragon Ball Daima is at this point still airing, so we'll have to see if there's any other shenanigans that comes out of Dragon Ball Daima. But that is it. Every Dragon Ball timeline we currently know about. But let me know what you guys think. Did I miss any, or is there anything I'm not taking into account? Did I mess up how some of these universes are connected, or where somebody came from? If you guys know, please let me know in the comments down below. And while you're down there, guys, please remember to hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, turn on that notification bell so you never miss another video from me, and I will see you guys in the next video.